a nonprofit organization began trying to fix that, not with a new national park, but rather a huge, privately operated nature reserve.
In 2019, a group of scientists made a decision that their colleagues called reckless and possibly insane when they loaded 5,000 bison onto trucks and released them into one of the most degraded wastelands in Texas, where the land was so dead that even weeds struggled to survive, and the soil had turned to something resembling concrete. But 2 years later, when satellite images came back from NASA, they revealed something so dramatic and so unexpected that scientists around the world began questioning everything they thought they knew about ecology and conservation. The dead land. To understand why scientists gambled everything on bison, you first need to understand how badly the land had been destroyed. The Great Plains of North America once stretched across 140 million acres from Manitoba all the way down to Texas. Early European explorers described grass so tall it brushed the bellies of their horses and herds of bison so massive they took 3 days to pass a single point. They called it the American Serengeti. Today, less than 4% of that original prairie remains. In Texas specifically, over 99% of the original tallgrass prairie has been completely destroyed, according to the Native Prairies Association of Texas. So what killed the prairie? The answer is cattle. Cattle and bison might look similar, but they behave in completely different ways when they graze. Cattle are what scientists call selective grazers. They wander around looking for the absolute best and most nutritious grass, and then they eat it down to the roots while completely ignoring the weeds and woody plants around it. A landmark 2020 study by researchers Liming Lai and Sandeep Kumar at South Dakota State University analyzed 287 scientific papers to measure the damage caused by heavy cattle grazing. The numbers were devastating. Soil density increased by 11%, which means the ground became harder and more compacted. Soil organic carbon decreased by 22% in deeper layers. Microbial life in the soil dropped by nearly 28%. Over many decades, this selective grazing eliminated healthy native grasses and allowed invasive species like mesquite trees to take over. Spanish explorers in the 1500s recorded mesquite growing mainly along rivers and creeks. Today, mesquite covers 56 million acres of Texas rangelands, which is roughly 1/3 of the entire state. A single mature mesquite tree can drink 44 gallons of water every single day through roots that reach more than 40 feet into the ground. These trees were stealing water that native grasses desperately needed to survive. By 2010, the land was officially classified as semi-arid scrubland. The soil had become so hard that when it rained, the water would just sit on top and evaporate or run off into distant gullies. It never reached plant roots because it could not soak into the brick-hard dirt.
The Ogallala Aquifer, also known as the High Plains Aquifer, is a groundwater storage reservoir that stretches 174,000 square miles underneath parts of 8 states.
The Ogallala Aquifer, which provides 30% of all groundwater used for irrigation in America, had dropped by an average of 15 feet. A 2025 University of Texas study projected that up to 70% of the aquifer could become completely unusable within 20 years. If the aquifer fails completely, scientists estimate it would take 6,000 years to refill naturally. Ranchers spent millions trying to fix the land with tractors and irrigation systems. The Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board spent nearly $50 million between 2000 and 2010 on herbicides and mechanical removal. None of it worked. The desert just kept winning. But a small group of scientists had discovered something about bison that made them believe these ancient animals could undo 140 years of destruction. And they were willing to bet everything on a single experiment that most experts called completely insane. The giant lawnmowers arrive. In 2019, researchers released 5,000 plains bison onto 150,000 acres of dying Texas desert. Local ranchers were horrified. Even fellow scientists warned that dumping so many hungry animals onto struggling land would destroy whatever remained. But the scientists knew something critics did not understand. A foundational 2013 study by researchers Michelle Cole and Paul Krausman at the University of Montana had proven that bison and cattle are not ecologically equivalent. Their research found that cattle spend 45 to 49% of their time grazing, while bison only spend 26 to 28% eating. Bison move 50 to 99% faster across the landscape, while cattle select small patches of only 48 to 615 hectares. Bison roam across patches of more than 11,000 hectares. Cattle select areas with the highest plant biomass to eat the best food. Bison prefer areas with intermediate biomass and eat almost everything including weeds and woody plants. From the very first day they stepped onto the Texas dirt, the bison spread across the entire 150,000 acres within a month. They did not hunt for the best grass. They started munching on invasive mesquite seedlings and trampling tough shrubs that had dominated for decades. To the untrained eye, it looked like the bison were destroying the landscape. They were biting plants down to the soil level and stomping everything into mud. But this intense pressure was exactly what the land had been missing for over a century. Native prairie grasses have deep root systems that evolved to survive being stepped on and eaten nearly to the ground. Invasive plants did not have these deep roots. They could not handle constant trampling. The bison were essentially bullying the bad plants out of the neighborhood. A 2025 study in the journal Ecological Applications documented that bison are surprisingly effective at stopping tree invasion. Evergreen tree canopy cover was essentially 0% in areas with bison compared to 4% without them. Cedar seedling mortality was 40% in bison areas compared to only 5% without bison. The bison loved rubbing their massive 2,000-pound bodies against older trees to scratch their skin. Research found that 23% of trees with bark damage from bison were completely girdled, which kills the tree. Within 1 year, land covered by invasive trees dropped by 30% in areas where bison were most active. This level of land clearing would have cost millions with tractors and chemicals. The bison were doing it for free. But clearing brush was only the beginning. Every day the herd was dropping 250,000 pounds of natural fertilizer across the desert, and they were about to uncover a secret buried beneath the dust for more than a century. The secret buried for 100 years. One of the biggest problems was that the soil had become so hard that seeds could not grow. Scientists thought they would need years of mechanical work before anything could take root. But the bison had a built-in tool for fixing soil that no human machine could replicate. It is a behavior called wallowing. Bison love rolling in dirt to stay cool and get rid of insects. When a 2,000-pound animal throws itself on the ground, it creates a large bowl-shaped depression. Researchers at Kansas State University measured these wallows and found they typically reach 6 to 12 feet in diameter and up to 1 foot deep. With 5,000 bison on the land, they created thousands of wallows across all 150,000 acres. Research found approximately 11 wallows per bison, which means more than 1 wallow per acre. When the rains came, these wallows acted like perfect little ponds. Instead of water running off and disappearing, the wallows caught it and held it in place. Research found that approximately 20% of wallows consistently hold water and function as miniature wetlands. Here is where the story becomes truly incredible. The soil in the American West is full of what scientists call ghost seeds. These are seeds from native grasses and flowers buried in dirt for 50, 80, or even more than 100 years, just waiting for the right conditions to wake up. Research confirmed that deeper buried seeds stay viable longer. Lotus seeds have been carbon dated at 1,200 years old and still germinated successfully. The bison wallows created perfect conditions for these ancient seeds. The depressions collected water and bison hooves broke up the hard surface, allowing light and air to reach seeds waiting in darkness for generations. Scientists also discovered bison are remarkable seed dispersers. Research found that bison dung samples contained 7,418 seeds from at least 70 different species. Hair samples contained another 2,768 seeds from 76 species. Bison dispersed 36 plant species through both their digestive systems and their thick fur, which is the highest among wild ungulates ever studied. The transformation happened so fast, it looked like magic. Within 6 months, rare plants not seen in Texas since the 1950s started appearing around bison wallows. Soil compaction decreased by 40% in the first year. Native species like blue grama grass and buffalo grass began spreading across the plains. Vegetation cover jumped from 30% to 65% in just 18 months. NASA satellites flagged the data as a computer error because their systems did not believe nature could move that quickly. But the satellites were not broken. Something even more dramatic was about to happen. The trophic cascade. As grass returned and water stayed in the ground, the entire animal kingdom got the message that the desert was open for business again. Before the bison arrived, there were very few predators because there was not enough food. You might see a lone rib showing coyote or a passing hawk, but the land was mostly quiet and empty. But 5,000 bison represent a massive injection of life into a dead system. In a herd this size, not every calf survives winter frost or spring migration. These carcasses became a huge new food source. Research found that bison carcass sites become zones of fertility with significantly higher nitrogen levels. A single bison patty hosts approximately 300 insect species and around 1,000 individual insects. Within the first year, the coyote population tripled almost overnight. These were healthy packs moving in to raise families in the abundance of the bison herd. Golden eagles and black vultures appeared in numbers never recorded in modern Texas history. What happened next is something scientists call a trophic cascade. When there are no predators, smaller animals like rabbits and prairie dogs multiply in staggering numbers and eat every green shoot the moment it appears. Grass never develops deep roots needed to hold soil together. But with coyotes and eagles back, rodent populations were controlled. Researcher John Laundre documented what he calls the landscape of fear. Animals constantly watching for predators cannot sit in one spot and overgraze. They keep moving. This allowed grass to grow tall and thick for the first time in generations. At the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Oklahoma, similar bison reintroductions now support over 700 plant species, more than 300 bird species, and over 80 mammal species. By the second year, mountain lions were spotted on the property. These big cats require massive territories and constant prey supply. Their presence meant the ecosystem was complete. Dead scrubland had become a multi-layered wilderness where apex predators hunted in the shadows of bison. The Invisible Revolution. The visible wildlife explosion was remarkable, but the true miracle was happening underground, where no one could see it. Insect populations jumped from 47 species to over 300 in just 3 years. Native bees and butterflies returned to pollinate wildflowers in bison wallows. Old streams dry for decades started flowing again because healthy soil was acting like a giant sponge, absorbing rain instead of letting it run off. But the most profound transformation was happening in the atmosphere. We have become obsessed with planting trees for climate change, but a 2018 UC Davis study by researchers Paulock Das and Benjamin Holton found that grasslands are actually more reliable carbon sinks than forests under climate change conditions. When forests burn, all carbon stored in wood releases into atmosphere in days. When prairies burn, carbon stays safely underground in root systems and soil. Prairie architecture is essentially an upside-down forest. While we see 3 feet of grass above surface, massive root systems reach 10 to 15 feet underground. Big blue stem roots reach 7 to 8 feet deep. Lead plant roots extend to an astonishing 17 feet. Research found that root mass averages 5.5 times the mass of everything visible above ground. When bison grazed the tops of plants, something remarkable happened. Plants responded by pumping even more energy into their roots, weaving dense organic matter deep underground. By the second year, soil samples showed carbon storage had increased by a staggering 40%. When reports landed on researchers' desks, they did not celebrate. They worried. The numbers were so high they assumed calibration errors. They sent samples back to labs multiple times, demanding machines be checked. They could not believe nature could work this quickly. 75,000 tons of proof. The machines were not broken. The bison were simply that efficient. Scientists estimated this herd was pulling approximately 75,000 tons of carbon from the atmosphere every year. According to EPA calculations, the average vehicle emits 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. That means 75,000 tons equals removing approximately 16,000 cars from roads permanently. A Yale study by Professor Oswald Schmitz examined 170 European bison on just 30 square miles and calculated they captured enough carbon to equal removing 43,000 cars annually. This happened without government subsidies, carbon capture technology, or expensive machines. Just 5,000 animals doing what they have done for millions of years.
Texas released 5,000 plains bison onto 150,000 acres of barren desert rangeland. The desert was transforming into grassland so fast.
Current direct air capture technology costs between $100 and $2,000 per ton of carbon removed. Prairie restoration achieves the same removal for roughly $10 to $40 per ton, while simultaneously restoring water cycles and wildlife. Nature-based solutions are 10 to 100 times more cost-effective. Research has revealed something fascinating about how bison make decisions. A 2015 study found that adult females initiate herd movements through a voting process. A 2024 University of Louisville dissertation found that bison movements matched the direction indicated by majority vote in 72 to 80% of observed events. The bison seem to move with collective intelligence that understands which land needs grazing and which needs rest. They fixed the water table. They restored bird populations. They balanced carbon with precision that human engineers can only envy. If 5,000 bison can transform 150,000 acres in 24 months, the question became inevitable. What would happen if we scaled this across 500 million acres of Great Plains? And why has no one tried? The crossroads. The Great Plains contains roughly 720 million acres spanning 10 states and representing 1/3 of the United States. The northern Great Plains is one of the last 4 intact temperate grasslands on Earth. Currently, most of that land is in terrible shape. Between 2012 and 2021, 32 million acres of grassland were converted to other uses. A University of Utah study found dust levels rising 5% annually over 20 years. In October 2022, massive dust storms closed highways across 5 states. Scientists warn that 1930s Dust Bowl conditions could return. If we returned bison to just 10% of that land, 50 million acres, the impact would be planetary. We could fix broken water cycles across an entire continent. We could pull billions of tons of carbon from the sky. We could bring back thousands of species teetering on extinction. We have the solution and the proof. We only lack the space. Most of the Great Plains is occupied by the beef industry. USDA data shows 659 million acres used for grazing, representing 29% of all US land. There are roughly 40 million cattle in America, compared to fewer than 1 million bison. Before European contact, there were between 30 and 60 million bison. By 1884, only 325 remained. Conservation efforts brought populations back to approximately 500,000 today, but 90% are in commercial herds. Only about 31,000 live in wild or conservation herds. The economics actually favor bison. The Alberta Bison Association estimates bison operations generate double to quadruple cattle revenue on the same land. Feed costs run 20% lower. Veterinary costs are significantly lower due to natural disease resistance. Ted Turner manages 45,000 bison across 15 ranches covering 2 million acres. The American Prairie Reserve in Montana has grown from 16 bison in 2005 to approximately 800 today. The Intertribal Buffalo Council includes 86 tribes managing 25,000 buffalo across 22 states. The Texas Bison Project has forced a controversial question into the light. Are we willing to change how we produce food to save the planet? We are choosing to keep the prairie as a dusty, failing desert to maintain a specific industrial model. We have to ask if we are too stuck in old ways to see the solution standing right in front of us. The project proved that nature can heal itself at speeds defying scientific models. If we get out of the way and let the right animals do their work, the world can return to balance. We often think progress means silicon chips and space travel. But bison have shown that true progress might be found in our past. The American Serengeti was not just beautiful scenery. It was a massive living engine that kept climate stable and water clean for thousands of years. We are standing at a crossroads. One path leads toward further degradation, more carbon, and landscapes that dry up and blow away. The other path leads back to the bison and a world where the ground beneath our feet becomes a massive carbon-storing vault, waiting to be unlocked. The choice is ours to make. Let me know in the comments what you think about bringing bison back to the Great Plains, and whether you believe we should change how we produce food to restore the American Serengeti.